So it's been really windy around here, and if I start to sound a little raspy or just a little like, then I apologize. It's allergies. Hope it's not germs. But anyway, you guys recall early last week I did a video about the Acer Predator X34 34-inch ultra-wide 21:9 IPS 100 megahertz gaming panel. And I switched my entire config to just this one panel. So today we're going to talk about this panel, what it's been like going back down to a single panel, and what this thing is like for gaming, because after all, that's who this thing is being touted towards. A $1,300 gaming panel. Holy hell, this thing is pricey. I want to thank today's sponsor, Harrys.com. Harrys is the official razor of the Movember Foundation, making this arrangement very, very easy for me. Now, not only am I passionate about the Movember Foundation bringing awareness to men's health and testicular cancer, and trust me, you save the testes, they're kind of important. But it has actually been a pleasure using the Harrys razor, and I gotta tell you right now, the amount of stuff that you get for 15 bucks in their Truman set or their starter pack is absolutely crazy. I mean, you get shaving cream, it smells really good. You get a razor handle, a spare razor head. The value is absolutely amazing. But anyway, look in the description of this video and you will see a link. Make sure that you put in my promo code 2cents in the promo box at checkout and you can save $5 off your first order. And considering everything that you see here only cost 15 bucks to begin with, you're gonna get all this for $10. And let me tell you, I challenge anyone to get that kind of a deal at any sort of big box brand. That's just simply not gonna happen. But anyway, guys, thanks Harrys.com once again for sponsoring today's video and bringing awareness to men's health and their involvement in the Movember Foundation. And that to me speaks volumes. Okay, here she is in all her glory, and I have to admit, I have already made a mistake. I mounted this thing on my Visa articulating arm immediately because I like the monitor to look like it's floating and such, which means I took off the base, which means the base isn't included in this video. But I can tell you, at least before we get started with the panel quality, that the base is amongst the highest quality of any monitor I've ever used. It's solid metal, it's got 5 degrees of tilt up, 35 degrees of tilt down, and it's got just an amazing quality to it. It's got built-in cable management, it's all metal. Who could ask for more? But anyway, I hope the pictures I put up here suffice because I've already packed away the base like in storage. Yeah, that's how sure I wasn't taking this monitor down. But obviously that brings us to point number 1, which is the fact that this thing is Visa mountable and it's 100 by 100 Visa mount, which is pretty standard. And if you guys want to know what arm I'm using with this, then click here on the screen or in the description. I'll put a link to the video as well about the monoprice arm that I am using to keep things going right here. It's actually a dual monitor arm, which I took one of the arms off and I'm just using it for this big guy. Now there's a lot of things we could talk about with this panel, and the fact that it's IPS was kind of a turnoff to me in the beginning. In fact, NVIDIA sent me this panel, not Acer. And the reason why NVIDIA sent it was because it's got their G-Sync technology. And I thought to myself, well, when they asked me if I wanted to check out that Acer panel that everyone's talking about, I thought we were talking about the 3440 by 1440p 144 hertz gaming panel, which is not an IPS. And I was a little disappointed when I heard it was IPS because typically IPS panels have slow response time. They're all about color accuracy, not so much about speed. But that has all changed right here. Now let's just go ahead and get some of the spec stuff out of the way. You know, some of you guys get completely wet over specs and stuff. I'll admit I kind of do the same thing. But anyway, this panel here is a 34-inch diagonal viewable QHD 3440 by 1440p curved monitor. Now the curve is, a lot of people are like, curve, that's dumb. But I will admit, it has been nice to look at. It really has been. But anyway, it is an IPS panel. It's an LED LCD TFT display. But it gives you 178 degrees of viewing angle from all sides. And that's one of the things that makes IPS really nice compared to, say, TN panel, is that you don't get any of that color shift whatsoever. It is accurate from all of the viewing angles that you could possibly look at this thing from. Now, it does feature a 4 millisecond response time. Now, some people are going to look at that and go, oh my God, that is so freaking slow. And the only reason they're going to say that is because there are panels out there like the Swift, which feature 1 millisecond response time. But if you look at the average response time of IPS panels, 4 milliseconds is incredibly fast. And in fact, I have not noticed any input lag whatsoever from the 4 milliseconds. I personally feel that anything under 5 is perfectly fine, especially when it comes to shooters I play like 99% shooters, and I don't have any issues whatsoever. I don't even notice it, so that's kind of a big deal. If shooters are not noticeable in the response time, no other game is going to be noticeable either. Now when it comes to the refresh rate, the spec sheet says this is a 60 hertz panel, although they advertise it is overclockable to 100 hertz. That's actually a big deal. Now coming down from a 144 hertz panel, losing 44 frames per second through G-Sync technology, even with that frame pacing and frame interval, you would think that that would be really noticeable. But it's actually more noticeable going from 60 to 100 than it is going from 100 to 144. Which means go ahead and cue that typical internet argument of,
well, the human eye can only see 24 frames per second anyway, which is why movies are in 24 frames per second, blah, 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 blah.
Doesn't really matter. Everyone's eye is going to perceive frame rates a little bit differently, and I happen to feel that I'm a bit sensitive when it comes to frame rates. And I notice the stutters and the slight interval gaps and mistimings where different frames are rendering at different intervals. Now that's where G-Sync comes in. So you've got an IPS panel that's overclockable to 100 hertz, and it's IPS. The color accuracy is amazing. 100% sRGB is what they claim, but it looks freaking amazing. And I hope my videos are going to look better too, because I've got a good IPS panel here. Now before we talk about gaming, there's a couple other specs to put on here, mostly because they're just comical. For instance, the contrast ratio on this thing is
100 million to 1.
Of course, that's dynamic. You know, it's really realistically going to be a hell of a lot lower than that once you have ambient light going on, but I digress. It's got an anti-glare coating on the screen, so you're not going to be looking at your own reflection or backlighting. In fact, I've got these soft boxes and some can lights going. There is no reflection whatsoever on this screen, and that's a huge deal. But you're also getting nice colors with a flat, which is technically a matte screen, which tends to make colors look more washed out, but that's not the case here, which is actually really, really good. But it's got a 4-port USB 3.0 hub built into it, which unfortunately the cord that comes with it is too short to reach from where my monitor is to the PC right next to it by using a path where the cable doesn't show. So you might have to get a longer USB 3.0 cable if you want to actually use that hub. One of the things that I really like about it though is the fact that it's got this under panel lighting, which is adjustable 5 different colors. And it's kind of funny because 3 of those colors obviously are red, green, and blue, but then it also has a gold and it has white. So it's kind of unfortunate that, you know, you don't get full RGB support on the color, but it's got some different modes to it, just like keyboards. It's got a breathing mode and sort of a night rider like sweeping mode and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to give you really nice accent lighting to your man cave or your desk or your computer space or whatever, which is a nice little bonus. Not necessarily a selling feature, but definitely a nice bonus. But of course, the biggest selling point on this is the fact that it's overclockable to 100 hertz. Now here's the thing I find a little bit confusing. You don't do it through a custom resolution, which you typically would do when you overclock a panel. You actually do it through the settings, which are all handled right here underneath the monitor, and then you just simply go into the refresh rate of the panel and set it to 100. Now doing that was pretty much plug and play, set it to 100. Sometimes you have to unplug the DP cable and plug it back in to make it recognize. Sometimes it could crash or need a reboot. But what's really weird is it's been so solid for me at 100 hertz, I don't understand why they don't just ship it at 100 hertz. I don't know what the circumstances would be that would make it not work at 100 hertz. Now of course, gaming on a 21:9 aspect ratio, actually something I want to mention real quick, one of the reasons why we call it 21:9 and not 7:3 is the fact that typically the numbers get bigger as they indicate whether or not the monitor is wider or larger. For instance, if we called it 7:3, which do you think is bigger? 4:3, 7:3, or 16:9? Wouldn't you kind of think 16:9 is bigger than 7:3 because just your natural instinct is to think that the bigger number is better? Kind of like what people are going through right now with X99 and Z170. But anyway, 21:9 panels are amazing to game on because they make you feel like you've got more immersion, more field of view to play with. And it's kind of like having a surround setup without dealing with multiple panels. Now obviously it's not as wide as say 3 panels, but it's pretty damn wide. As you can see right here compared to my hand, this thing is pretty wide. It's not really picking up on the camera how wide it really is. But you get much more field of view to play with. And that is a big deal for things like FPS shooters and MMOs and things like that. You can see more of the ground, you can see what's going on in the game, you just feel more visible, which is a big deal. Now, one of the things though to keep in mind is it's going to depend on whether or not the gaming developer even includes 21:9 aspect ratio in their resolution settings. Most of the time it's not a problem. and ultra-wide panels have been around long enough to where most game developers have either started coding for it or patched their games to support it. However, there are brand new titles that still aren't doing that, for instance, Fallout 4. If you're playing Fallout 4 and you have an ultra-wide panel, you've probably already realized that the only way to get 21:9 aspect ratio to actually fill the screen is to go into the INI file and put in a custom resolution, which then begs the question, why did the developers of Fallout 4 simply not add the feature in there when all you're doing is going to the INI file and telling it what resolution to run at? Couldn't they have simply made that a dropdown? Anyway, I guess that's more of a Fallout 4 complaint, not a panel complaint, so I'll digress again. But playing games like FPS shooters or even the new Star Wars Battlefront, which I've been playing a bit of, the 4 millisecond response time is not a problem. Some might think that that's slow because of the 1 millisecond panels out there. However, that has not bothered me one bit. I haven't even noticed it. And the 100 megahertz speed on this, again, as I said earlier, I don't notice the difference between 100 and 144. It's perfectly smooth for me. 60 hertz, can't do it after going to 144. 60 hertz just looks, even with G-Sync, very, very choppy to me. Even though the frame interval is perfect, it just, motion and turning seems very choppy to me. I'm very used to this. It's like looking at that, true motion upscaling that you see on TV panels and stuff. But when it comes to editing, I've actually had a very nice time editing on this. I don't have to fill up the screen with my workflow. I can simply put part of the screen as my workflow and then have part of the screen too where I can put my folders and things, and it hasn't been that big of a deal to me. Going from the 4 panels down to this guy has been very easy. It's a very easy transition. But the best thing to do is go down to your local computer store, and hopefully they've got one on display. Make sure you guys go and check it out. That's really the only way you're gonna know if this is something that you like. Now the price of this thing is pretty fucking high at about $1,300 MSRP. You're gonna see prices vary, and it's gonna probably come down quickly. But $1,300 is more than a lot of people are spending on their entire system. And I certainly wouldn't recommend putting a $1,300 panel like this on a lesser expensive system, because you are going to need some horsepower to run this puppy, considering 3440 by 1440 is not a whole lot smaller than 4K. In fact, you've got almost the horizontal pixels of 4K and not quite the vertical pixels of 4K, but it's close. So it's something to keep in mind. You need some good graphics to run this thing if you want high settings. I think it's awesome, but again, for the price, it better be. For the price, this thing better have breakfast ready for me in the morning, damn it. I feel like I'm missing out on something if it doesn't. But there it is, guys. Tell me what panels you're using. Obviously, the QHD Ultra Wide is a very niche, very small percentage of the gamers that are out there. A lot of people aren't into it. I wasn't either. But now that I'm using it, I've gotten used to it, and I'm not sure I could go back to a 16:9. I keep spoiling things for me. Or at least the company sending me this crap is spoiling it for me. God, I think it's time to quit YouTube. Just kidding, I'm not quitting, but I hope you guys have enjoyed today's video. Give me a shout on Twitter if you guys have any questions about this panel. I'd like to answer any questions you might have. I know this video was a bit longer, but there was a lot to talk about with this panel. I mean, let's face it, this is like the panel that everyone is talking about right now. So I figured I'd give you guys as much information as I could without you getting to get hands-on. And don't even think about getting hands-on. You're not allowed in here. This is my space. This is off limits. All right, guys, I'm gonna turn around and play some games after I edit this video, I think. Anyway, see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.